Welcome to everybody. It is a pleasure to have you here. I think that more people are connecting slowly, but we are going to kick off because we have only 1 hour. Welcome to our workshop at PeaceTech, Will Technology and Wars. It is a quite provocative title, and I'm happy to have an amazing panel to share some knowledge about what peace promotion activities and peace tech are. First of all, I would like to do housekeeping because at the beginning, the agenda of the workshop is that we are going to present some presentations and to have a brief discussion from our panel at the beginning to start. And so I would appreciate if during this time you can turn off your microphone and maybe even your cameras, because you are going to see the presentations from the panelists. And please use the chat to write all your comments, questions, reflections, and maybe we can address it during the questions and answers time. That is going to be most of the time we are going to spend it in really addressing which are your questions. And I'm going to start introducing myself. I'm Mariazel Maqueda-López. I'm the head of the PeaceTech division at the Essential Tech Center at the EPFL. This is a new division of innovation and technology that has been founded last November. So it is quite new. And I would like our panelists to introduce themselves. So maybe I'm going to go for you one by one. Hiba Casas, can I ask you to introduce yourself and your organization?
Good morning or almost afternoon, everyone. My name is Hiba Casas and I head the Principles for Peace initiative and the secretariat that is hosted here at Interpeace in Geneva, and I'll tell you a little bit more about it when I speak later.
Thank you very much, Hiba. Karen, can you maybe introduce yourself and your organization?
Hi everyone, so my name is Karen Banner and I'm a project associate at the Center for Humanitarian Dialogue's social media and conflict mediation program. So we're working on digital conflict and mediation.
Thank you very much. Ahmed, I'm here to ask you to introduce yourself.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ahmed Aleba. I'm a senior program officer at Swiss Peace. It's mediation program, where Swiss Peace is a peace research institute focused on the advancement of peace building, and we focus on mediation support in my program. And nice to meet all of you.
Thank you very much. Last but not least, Miguel.
Thank you, Mariazel. Thanks, everyone. Good morning. Wherever you are, my name is Miguel, and I teach at university here in Spain, in Valladolid, and I'm also an associate at an organization called Conciliation Resources. I'm looking forward to the discussion today.
Thank you very much. So just to kick off our discussion, I'm going to share with you some slides to introduce you the concept of PeaceTech that sometimes is not, it's quite new actually for many people. Here at the EPFL, we are quite familiar with technology. Technology, it drives how we communicate, how we eat, how we drink. Overall, at the university, we are surrounded by technology. But actually, when I started to work in PeaceTech, my colleagues and friends, they were asking me, actually, how are you driving peace and what is peace? That is a quite good question, because from now on, from this workshop and maybe for the future, it is good that our public, our participants are more familiar with the official definition of peace, because peace is not only defined as the absence of violence, as the absence of conflict, but rather as the absence of the possibility of violence and conflict. So we are not going to have peace only when there is no wars in the streets, but when we are able to positively address our conflicts and to communicate and behave with non-violent ways of communication. Having said that, why is so important now that we stress and formulate and design and implement more peace promotion activities and more peace tech promotion activities? Well, the reality is that over the last 10 years, more than a half of the world's population have lived in direct contact with significant violence or conflict. We're not speaking only about wars, but about terrorism, urban militia, armed gangs, or violent popular uprisings. That is without considering all the violence that we experiment each day virtually in the internet and in the social media. This is important because we have currently in 2020, the last statistics has said that nearly 168 million people will need humanitarian assistance. And the 80% of the humanitarian crises are caused by conflict, by violent conflict. Also, due to COVID-19 outbreak in 2020, additional 23 million people were pushed into poverty in countries affected by conflict and violence. So we can see that addressing violence, conflict, and promoting peace, it is an emergency. It is something that is urgent to do. Technology, normally we relate it more with the design and the implementation of products for the military market. There are more and more sophisticated weapons and guns and ammunition that have been developed by using technology. Technology has been also used to drive conflicts online. Every day we experiment hate speech, fake news, deep fakes, and all of this kind of misinformation and disinformation that we are going to address today during our workshop, that is a kind of violence to which all of us are exposed. Today we are going to address the fact that even if technology many times with this dual use that it has, have been able to facilitate the spread of violence, it can be used actually as a driver for peace. In this field, the concept and the field of PeaceTech was born as a field that is able to enable better prevention, monitoring, containment, and constructive resolution of violence and conflict by means of innovative technologies. When we speak about PeaceTech and the market that is connected to PeaceTech, we speak about virtual and augmented reality to foster empathy with the users of video games or with the users of video tools. We speak about artificial intelligence to predict risks, to predict conflict or violence, or to be able to detect and track hate speech and fake news in the internet. And for example, about blockchain, how can we use blockchain to verify, to identify and to label information and verify if this information in the internet, it is trustable. But not only, PeaceTech is connected with each of the technologies and techniques that are able in a way to promote peace, to foster peace. We are speaking about all possible technologies that actually we have the luck to have at the EPFL. Having said that, I would like to finish because we have this public, the opportunity to speak to this public, that is the EPFL community, that is a quote about that we cannot always build the future for our youth, but we can build our youth for the future. So I would be happy that today some talents from among the participants are getting interested in peace promotion and how to use peace to promote technology to promote peace. with this, I'm going to stop. And I think this frame is going to be quite completed by my panelist, my first panelist, that is Hiba. Hiba, if you can share maybe your screen or just to speak and explain a little bit more this frame working which you work with Interpeace.
Great, thank you, Mariazel. And I think what I'm going to do is actually share my screen, and I think you can see it, right? Can you see my screen?
No, I cannot. Did you share? Now it's coming.
Okay, is it good now? Okay,
it's
great.
Perfect.
All right, so I'm going to complement some of the points already started to come across from Mariazel, and really bring in more of the practitioner perspective in terms of what are some of the key arguments that are happening in this space, because the Peace Caucus is also going through a reflection process. Do we need to rethink our approach to peace? Based on some of the key trends that we see. So I'd like to share with you some of these just to trigger the conversation and see some of the key challenges that potentially tech can provide a potential solution or an enabler role to. And maybe just to kickstart this conversation, I think many people now, Afghanistan is in the minds of people because it's more and more in the news with the announcement of the US that they will be withdrawing their forces in September. And if we think that there has been almost 20 years of stabilization efforts and investment in terms of 2.4 billion US dollars to stabilize, to bring an immediate or stabilizing effect to reduce the levels of violence. And then we look at the trend that over the past 20 years, it was almost a correlation between increase in violence and increase in investment in stabilization effort. It merits a thinking, a reflection process that we need to potentially rethink our strategies, both for stabilization and peace. But this is the reality, for example, of Afghanistan and how violence has been escalating. Some of the key arguments which is getting the space into a reflection is the fact or the realization that what we see over the past decades is that the nature of conflict has been changing. The world has been changing. We have technological transformation. The social contract is affected. There's so many changes that have been happening over the past 50 years, which really drive a very different reality. But if you think about the peace and security architecture, the international system that usually responds to these crises, it has not really changed in the past 50 years. And that can reflect why potentially we have such a poor track record of the international community in both realizing or sustaining peace. And I'll share with you some key statistics which show why we're making this claim that currently we have not been as successful as we hope to be. And potentially because the system is completely outdated and the approach is completely outdated, that current approach becomes quite unfit for purpose in realizing or brokering the peace that we need to achieve. So let's look at some of the trends, and I'm not going to go into details, but I'll just give you a glimpse. So take a look at the screen as I'm quickly running through them. What we notice is an upward trend in violence. We have over 53, actually 2020, 54, 2019 active conflicts, and that's a significant high. So we are seeing this upward trend in violence. We also see a historic downward trend in peace, in the sense that there are more conflicts that are starting than conflicts that are ending. And this is very clear with the fact that we see more internal conflict. We see a rising in non-state actors, armed actors, and increasing in violence by them. The fact that we see demonstrations increasing dramatically in many parts of the world. And I think prior to COVID, the year, and maybe I'll have even a slide about that in terms of the spike in demonstrations, but also we see a common feature that security forces tend to intervene violently in these protests. And Mariazel talked about the increasing humanitarian imperative, but also conflicts are becoming longer. The average number of years for conflict has increased. It's between now 9.7 to 14 years. And of course, it is driving this humanitarian imperative, which is also becoming prolonged. So humanitarian assistance can no longer be delivered on this assumption of a quick displacement 6 months cycle. It's actually people are being stuck in refugee camps up to 25 years. But also what we see is conflict recurrence. 90% of conflicts that have erupted in the last 2 decades actually are in countries that have experienced civil war. So when peace is realized, it's only temporary, and we see again and again continuous relapse. So this is just a quick view for you to think about, okay, there's something that we are doing that is wrong, that is not fit for purpose, that we are not achieving the results that we are setting for ourselves as international community in terms of realizing and sustaining peace. But then on the other side of the coin, beside the approach, we also have a reality that the world is changing. And if you look, I think this is an important one just to keep in your mind. What we see across the globe is a growing mismatch between how countries are advancing in terms of economic and material progress. So we are seeing positive progress in terms of life expectancy, poverty reduction, business environment. It's across the globe, it's a positive trend. But then when it comes to the institutional development and also freedom of the press, quality of information, even hostility and polarization, we are doing by and large more negatively across the world between 2005 and 2019. We have also touched upon this, that also the world is changing because we are seeing a historic number of social protests. In 2019, saw a significant increase. It was, I think in 2009, it was around 27% of countries that had some kind of mass protests. In 2019, it reached 44%. So almost half of the countries around the world has seen this mass mobilization and springing of social movements. And of course, the world is growing younger. We have more and more young people, 1.8 billion people in the world today. And 90% of those are living in developing countries. And 1 in 4 young people live in conflict countries. And of course, we have technology, which, in terms of, we have more globalization, more technology. And with more information, what we see a direct correlation, there is rising expectations because, of course, as more people have access to information and societies become more aware of their relative position, then they are demanding an improvement in terms of whether it's in terms of inclusion or addressing inequality. I'm going to skip this because I'm conscious of time, but just to frame that what our initiative here at the Principles for Peace initiative, which is really a collective effort, and as Secretariat, we're trying to bring in the effort of the Peace Caucus as a whole, has actually come on to life to address some flaws that we see again and again in our approach to peace. And one of them is this fundamental flaw that peace processes and our approach to peace tend to focus more on conflict resolution rather than on sustainable peace. And that goes to the point that Mariazel talked about, the definition of peace. Is it the absence of violence, or is it really much more beyond that in terms of what can actually get us to sustainable peace? And unfortunately, until now, although we know that definition, the way peace processes are designed and structured and all of these other flaws are associated with the fact that, unfortunately, the whole system still operates more on the paradigm of a negative peace, which then drives a whole approach of a political settlement approach and negotiations that are more exclusive, more elite driven, and do not address more of the root causes or issues around the political economy or lay the foundation for sustainable peace. So we're still stuck in that paradigm, despite the fact that the world, of course, is changing. So we've launched actually a global process now to try and address that and set up an international commission. And we are, in fact, trying to anchor their work both in evidence, but also in terms of amplifying local voices and bringing the perspectives of citizens and bringing them closer to all power institutions. You know, this gap that we've talked about is something that we're trying to address. And we're trying to use AI, for example, in looking at what peace should deliver in the eyes of, for example, Afghani youth, or in the eyes of citizens in Colombia or in Northern Ireland after so many years of the Good Friday Agreement, where we see sometimes frictions rising. But what we are struggling with, which I'm really looking forward to hearing more, is that are some questions which I think even in an initiative like ours really need to try and answer, is really around how can we leverage and maximize the positive impact of the technological transformation that we're living today, both in terms of providing some practical solution around inclusion, around building and laying the social foundations for peace. And that's where, for example, essential tech comes into play. How can we also enhance trusts in institutions and bridge that gap between old and new power, between this rising expectations and social mobilizations and citizens' engagement and all power institutions which are stuck in almost another century? And how can we minimize also the impact which threatens the social contract with what we've seen, for example, in so many countries, including the US, when we're talking about the levels of polarization and the insurrection that we've seen in January, which was out there in the news, and the remnants from it. So really looking forward to hearing the panelists in sharing all their insights. And I'm hoping that perhaps we're going to extract some great ideas from this to take the process forward. Thank you, Mariazel.
Thank you very much, Hiba. Thank you very much. I think it has been a great presentation about how we are facing more and more challenges at full speed, and how many opportunities maybe we can find in the technological transformation in order to deal with this as better as possible, and to promote trends that are going more into the peaceful zone of the graphs that you have presented. I think that our panelist, Hamed, he has a good understanding about the challenges that we face in mediation and peace processes, and how technologies are supporting these initiatives. Ahmed, the word is to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me start with something a bit further from mediation, but actually something related to an event happening today, which is the US-Russia summit in Geneva. Before coming to Geneva, US President Biden took part in the NATO summit in Brussels. If you check the communique that came out of the meeting, you'll find that the word cyber was mentioned 26 times. The word disinformation was mentioned, I think 5 times. And the word democracy was mentioned 12 times. This might give you a sense of priorities of such a group of nations with regards to collective security. Definitely 26 mentions of cyber is noteworthy. But now back to our topic. Peace mediation is simply put a process whereby a third party assists conflict parties in resolving the conflict they're at, and this assistance can take many forms. As mediators engage conflict parties to help reach a peaceful resolution of their conflict, those mediators are somehow swimming against the current, calling for peace in a conflict environment where the sentiments and the interests, run high and the interests collide. And that is to say that the mediation does not happen in a void, but is rather directly or indirectly affected by the conflict environment. As Mariazel and Hiba both said, over the last decade, digital technologies have been changing the landscape of conflicts, with increasing access to the internet, access to smart devices, as well as the multiplicity and proliferation of social media platforms. This all causes the information environment in which conflicts take place and where pro-peace actors operate to constantly shift. This goes for multilateral institutions such as the UN or civil society actors. Peace builders and mediators, however, or rather, therefore, need to better understand the role of digital technologies and how they can fuel conflict, or why we're here today, how they can also be used to catalyze peace. So it's important to recognize the many challenges that digital technologies are increasingly posing to peace building and mediation. One particular challenge related both to the information environment and the mediation efforts, consequently, are the obvious, very famous theme of today's world, the malicious uses of technology to propagate unsubstantiated rumors, disinformation, basically, or spreading hate speech against certain groups, communities, actors, and causes. And such patterns of use of social media, we know that they exacerbate polarization in communities and societies. They silo people with similar views. They create echo chambers, creating further divisions. And that's not only true, I think we all know by now today, it's not only true for in violent conflict environments, but also in some countries in the West. This information has the potential to easily undermine ongoing peace efforts. I think that's a no-brainer. It can set progress back, it can set trust back, and fuel hatred. Mediators themselves can and have been subject to rumors, attacks, and concerted negative campaigns on social media. And this was at times instigated by concerted efforts from rival groups, not to the mediator, but rival groups within the conflict context, or even external and regional states and other types of actors. Social media companies have generally, as we know, been criticized for falling behind in addressing mis and disinformation efforts. The difference being, of course, that disinformation is knowingly spreading false information, contrary to misinformation, which is an unknowing, assumedly unknowing act. They have, however, at times, social media companies taken universal or country or conflict-specific actions to curb mis and disinformation. There is a reason why you get today a message on WhatsApp saying this picture has been forwarded too many times. Such simple design considerations can have a considerable act on how the conflict environment looks like. There are otherwise potential challenges that have not yet perhaps significantly manifested themselves in conflict settings, such as deep learning applications, deep fakes, even blockchain. There's no clear picture yet, I would say, as to what are the direct implications or the concrete challenges that they could pose to peace mediation. But this means that mediators also need not to fall behind, but rather be proactive about understanding how they can leverage these tools in their respective contexts. And the answer here, of course, is it depends. It's very contextual. Peacemaking is very contextual. It always depends on the environment that you're at. There are, of course, stable norms, but in terms of how you go about these conflicts, you need to look at the context very closely. The message here being that it's important for digital technology actors to work with peace actors on solutions that they might want to introduce. Such complementarity and forging of alliances and partnerships is key to an integrated approach, one that, of course, should assert national and or local ownership and validation. And just because I'm talking mainly about challenges doesn't mean that there are not awesome opportunities that digital technologies can bring, especially in the area of inclusion of people in peace processes, promoting strategic communication of peace actors, and unlocking the potential of data analysis that can help mediators further understand the conflict dynamics on and offline, including applications of natural language processing and other forms of big data analysis. To close, and having said so, it would already do a huge service to peacemakers if people designing digital technologies, tools, and platforms, again, were to consider the non-technical, the social, and the political implications of their work. This would include questions of design ethics, product localization, and people-centered approaches to technology. One challenge here is one could become too easily tool-centric, even peacemakers. I have to say, when talking about technology, they run the risk of becoming too much tool-centric in their thinking when looking at digital tools and solutions, when they should be problem and conflict centered, and I believe Hiba also alluded to that. The focus on the tool should really not supersede the process and the purpose that you are addressing. We're looking forward to hearing from the rest of my colleagues, as well as comments and questions from the floor, and back to you, Mariazel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ahmed. I think it has been really key, your reflections regarding the need to break silos and bridge the practitioners working in peace processes with the technologists that understand how to design a tool. It is this bridge, this inclusion, even at a design level of the tools is quite important, and it is needed in order to face all the challenges that we are facing nowadays with the use of the technical transformation for the means of peace promotion. I think that Karen, our next panelist, she has a quite good understanding about what is happening and the challenges that we are facing in social media nowadays. So Karen, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mariazel. So I'll just share my screen for a quick presentation. Hopefully you can all see this. Yep. Great, wonderful.
That's great.
So just to give a bit of background on the Center for Humanitarian Dialogue. So the organization works to mitigate and resolve armed conflicts through mediating between conflict parties and facilitating dialogue. So this has been a kind of a traditional way of mediation, but now more and more we're seeing digital conflict. You come into this, and we can't ignore the role that social media plays in conflict. So there are initiatives to help mediators better understand digital conflict, and Ahmed was mentioning some of the tools as well. But at the end of the day, this behavior, this problematic content, it's all hosted on social media platforms. And so we can't ignore their own role in this. So I'll speak about kind of the social media threats to peace processes that we've seen, and what platforms can, do to address this. So up until recently, there's been, little to no consideration by platforms of the need for specific policies related to or to address peace processes. Everything is very much kind of Western centric. We've seen last year the platforms focused very heavily on the US election and bring in new sorts of tools or policies to address this. But peace processes, they often receive like kind of less global attention than elections, but they are still crucial civic processes, and they have a significant real world impact. So we think it's necessary that platforms need to adjust their policies to address this. So at HD, we've kind of been tracking how social media plays a role in conflict. And so I'll just talk through some of the kind of behaviors that we've seen across the platforms that have been used to undermine peace efforts. So here's just a few examples. So things like disinformation. We've seen this been used quite a lot to undermine peace talks. This can be in the form of kind of forged documents related to talks. In Libya last year, we saw convincing photos of forged documents that were, shown to be a signed agreement by participants, and this went viral, and it really undermined the legitimacy of the talks. So things like this can really affect the talks. Other kinds of disinformation and misinformation, like narrative laundering as well. So this is kind of creating and spreading narratives designed to weaken the legitimacy of a peace process. Again, we saw this a lot being used in Libya last year, where there were kind of claims of foreign interference, and this really kind of impacted talks as they were happening in the room. So we also see things like harassment, and increasingly mediators and participants in peace talks themselves are often becoming the target of harassment and calls to violence online. This includes kind of direct attacks on the mediators, calls to attack, sometimes the UN office in Libya, again, for example, using Libya as a key example because it's something quite recent, and social media really was a big factor in these peace talks. We see harassment through character assassinations of key actors in the talks, corruption allegations, and all these kinds of things that can really affect talks as they're happening in the room, and including as well impersonation accounts of participants. So Facebook accounts people have created to pose as mediators or participants of a peace talk, and they can misrepresent the conversations that are going on during these mediation processes. We also see incitement to violence, and this can be usually quite directly, you know, like as mentioned earlier, kind of calls to attack an office or certain participants. And we see weaponization of information and behavior as well. So this can be weaponizing information such as kind of leaking information from confidential talks. Also, we see on Facebook, there can be sometimes Facebook ads that are specifically created to discredit peace talks. So in the Philippines, we saw a case where newspapers or blogs were buying Facebook ads to kind of push certain messages and clearly driving one specific narrative on the peace process. So these are just some examples, and as I said, we just can't ignore the role that these play in peace talks. So mediators now need to be better equipped to address this, but also social media platforms need to understand why this is so important and what they can do to address this. So what can platforms do? They have, you know, policies. They have civic integrity policies like Twitter. They've got policies related to elections and things like this. But really, they're not paying attention to peace processes much. And some of the issues that I just described can be really simply addressed just by kind of strengthening the policies that they have already in place, or making small changes to kind of better address high conflict risk countries. Specific things that platforms could do is support mediators in identifying these threats. Platforms don't have specific teams necessarily in certain countries, and they might not be aware of peace talks and the importance of peace talks. So this kind of collaboration with mediators can only help to strengthen knowledge sharing and show platforms what exactly is a threat to a peace process and what should be done. And things like ensuring that existing policies are actually enforced. Some of these can be written out in platforms' policy documents or mentioned, but we don't see them actually being enforced. So this needs to be enforced in the full extent possible where peace processes are taking place. And when adapting policies, this could be something simple as there's something on Facebook called Facebook Protect. And this is often used in elections for, it could be political leaders or people running in elections. And it's a way to, you know, strengthen the security of their account and make sure that they're not at high risk of security breaches. This could just simply be extended to mediators who are taking part in a peace process or participants in a peace talk. So things like this is just a simple way, a simple thing that platforms can do to protect peace processes a bit more. We see that misinformation is often labeled during elections. This could be labeled during peace processes too. So simple changes can be made by the platforms. I think at the end of the day, what we really need is greater kind of practical collaboration between the mediation community and social media platforms. I think that's one of the best ways that we can go forward in advancing this work. But there is still a lot of work to be done. And so with that, I'll hand back over to you, Mariazel.
Thank you very much, Karen. Actually, I would like maybe to ask you a question that has been posted by one of our participants. You were speaking about how the Colossus, Facebook, Twitter, etc. They are like maybe sometimes ignoring the the suggestions or really just ignoring how to promote peace or not to promote conflict in the platforms. How do you see, as a peace practitioner working in social media, how do you see social media that support peace building activities? How do you really imagine that the social media new platforms could be? Would it be only like reading this kind of policies in an angle, or do you think that there were going to be, there could be like some filters or blockers, or how do you really dream of these new social media that are promoting peace?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. I think one of the key things is just tackling this at the source and making sure that platforms have teams that are built with people who have local knowledge, cultural context, knowledge of the conflict and the peace process, and they can then input into the wider kind of country's community policy or the whole platform's policy on what can be kind of tailored, what should be, you know, either labeled as misinformation, for example, or what should simply be removed. It's tricky because, you know, if there's something bad, just because something's bad, you can't necessarily remove it. We can't go ahead and start removing all kinds of content, and there's ethical questions related to this. But I do think if you just start and build a core team within these platforms in high-risk countries, where social media is clearly making a negative impact, and bring in their input and their knowledge in this context, I think things like this will factor to promote kind of less harmful behavior on social media.
Thank you very much, Karen. I think that this go back to the identity and to the local identity of even of social media. It's something really interesting. And maybe Miguel, that is who's our last panelist, has something else to say about it. I know that you're coming with some practical cases, so please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mariazel. And it is frankly intimidating to speak after such great speakers, but I'll try to make it interesting for you guys and hopefully provide something that resonates with your experiences, current, past, or maybe future. So allow me to share my screen with you quickly. And if you can give me a thumbs up if you're seeing a screen with 4 images, super. Thanks very much for that. Well, look, let me introduce myself very briefly. I'm a sociologist, so I'm a bit of a different animal here. I'm not a political scientist, and I'm not a peace mediator myself. And I think that has implications as to the way that I work. But I'm really happy that today we are having this discussion, hopefully with technologists, you know, with the students also in technology, because I think this type of conversation doesn't happen enough. And that's why, you know, in innovations like Essential Tech, and the Cyber Mediation Network are fundamental. I'm going to focus on dialogue myself. I'm not going to focus on mediation, but I'll focus on the broader picture of community dialogue. And I will give you 4 examples, hopefully within the 5 minutes, where technology has been useful for us. And when I say us, I mean the many organizations that I've worked with in the past. Now, I know that my colleagues are probably going to not be happy about me doing this, but I'm going to oversimplify and say that dialogue typically happens at 2 levels. It either happens at a political level or anywhere else, right? And over the last 10 years, I keep finding that the link between these 2 is very, very complicated to establish. And that is exactly where I have found that technology has been useful in trying to bridge those 2 and trying to connect them and make for a sustainable conversation, hopefully bringing knowledge from the communities into the political processes, but also vice versa. So the first example comes from the work that we've done in Ukraine over the last few years. Probably all of you will be familiar with what is known by many Ukrainians as the Revolution of Dignity and the whole process that followed, including the war in the East. As part of the response to that process, there was a massive program for reforms in the country that was launched by the government that had to do with basically every social aspect in life, corruption, transparency in government, but also health, education, land ownership, it's a massive reforms process that you can imagine is very difficult to track and also very difficult to understand how people are perceiving. And so we came in with that understanding that there needs to be a conversation between citizens and politicians who are leading this process, right? Policymakers. And what we did is we used one thing that was mentioned today before, I think it was by Hiba, who mentioned social listening, right? Social media listening, which simply consists of going into social media with a set of keywords, with a set of maybe parameters that you set in advance, and trying to hear what people are saying about the reforms process. I'm a bit limited as to how much specifics I can share with you. I apologize for that, but what you're seeing here is part of the result of that social listening. And if you're familiar with this way of working, you know, of developing clusters, developing categories of content, you can already see that we have some clusters there. And you can probably guess that we're talking about specific areas of reforms in each one of these clusters. The color of the bubbles indicates the different social networks that we studied. We studied Facebook, LiveJournal, and Twitter. LiveJournal being a bit of a legacy social media, but that's still active, especially among older populations in Ukraine. And so we were able to find out what were the main topics that people talked about, what were they worried about, their main concerns, who were key influencers that NGOs needed to know about, and what were the moments where we had the most activity. Now, all of these we packaged, we put it together, and we gave it to a working group of NGOs that were supposed to, let's say, advise the reforms process, but also to contest it when things weren't going great, when people were not happy about the process. What could we do about that? So that's one example for you. The second example comes from Bosnia and Herzegovina, where we did some work on hate speech and violent extremism online. And this is a much more complicated piece of work that had its own challenges. But essentially, we had the work divided in two teams. And I think this is true for most of the implementations of social media listening, especially in our field, in peace practice. You have a team of people who are qualitative researchers who have hands-on experience on the topic, on the context, on the country, who were answering questions such as what is extremism? Where could we find it? How can we define it? And then we had another team that was the quantitative, you know, the tech people, data scientists in this case, trying to say, well, from your definitions, how can we transfer that into something that we can measure and that we can do it quickly and up to scale? Now, as if you're familiar with machine learning algorithms, and I know that many of you are, you know that it is extremely intensive work. We were doing it in 3 different languages. We were doing it in Bosnian, in Serbian, and in Croat. And we had no pre-trained library. We didn't have any content that was already marked as, oh, this could be hate speech. So our qualitative researchers, they had to do that themselves for more than 3,000 comments collected from newspapers and blogs. So you can imagine that this creates a little bit of tension between the expectations from the qualitative team and also the needs from the quantitative team. And this is very difficult to balance when you don't have enough time or enough money, right? I've covered 2 examples, Mariazel, give me a minute and a half more. The third example is close to my heart. This is a piece of work that we've been doing, or that we did in 2019. Unfortunately, we had to end it due to COVID restrictions. But this was a project to try and give voice to refugees living in Lebanon and in Jordan, coming from Syria. And this goes back to this idea of trying to connect political processes and political discussions with the rest, right, in inverted commas. And what we found was in 2019, there was a lot of discussion, a lot of conversations going on in the European Union about the potential return of refugees from Syria to their country. And we wanted to learn, what did refugees think about this? So we formulated a series of questions that you can see in the slides, but that had to do with feelings, with their imagination of a future, with conditions for return, what a peaceful life in Syria would look like, And this is no different from classic qualitative work. What we changed is we talked to more than 270 people who gave us their view. And normally this is put into a report, but we use something that is called dialogue mapping, which you can do online. There are many free tools to do, to try and capture the whole breadth of experiences. And so you can go on that website and you'll see the different maps and the experiences from all of the people that we interviewed. This is something we've done in other contexts as well. We've done it in Yemen, for example, with NGOs who were having conversations as to what are the main things that we need to do. We map that out and we feed it back to the group. So not to only listen, but also to give a voice. And the final example is an example that is external to me. I haven't worked on this myself, but I think you might find it interesting. That has to do with satellite imagery and cross-border conflict. This comes from a project where Conciliation Resources, which is the organization that I'm an associate for, is working. That's called Accept. It's a large framework contract. And one of the many things they're doing is they're using satellite images to try and find out what are the patterns in cross-border movements, right? Specifically in pastoralism. So when, you know, herders cross the border and might move into areas that might perceive them negatively. So those are 4 examples from me that I hope are useful, and I'm always happy to develop further later on. So thank you very much, Mariazel. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Miguel. I found super interesting everything that you have said, but overall, this need of putting together to speak and dialogue people coming from natural social science in the same table, deciding together what to do, what is the need, what's the challenge. I think that this qualitative, quantitative example that you have given is quite important. People studying like same problem from different perspectives. We have such time left, it is 5 minutes, but as this is being recorded and is going to be shared in our circles at the EPFL, and it is going to be maybe key to finish with what you would like to say to the future talents in social media tracking, artificial intelligence, bots, I mean, all these technologies that we have spoken about today. What would you say, each of you, to these future talents that may be interested in the future in working in this field and in this market, actually, to find for opportunities in this market? So maybe if you could give like 2 key ideas per panelist, it would be great to finish with this maybe even challenge for them. Ahmed, maybe you have 2 ideas, 2 key, really shortly ideas to share with these future talents.
Thanks a lot. Absolutely. I already mentioned them in my remarks. Work with peace builders and consider the non-technical impacts of your work. Consider the political impacts. Thanks.
Yeah, that is quite right and really crisp to the point. Maybe Karen, can you give us 2 more ideas about it?
Yeah, I'd say kind of putting local context in any kind of tech intervention is key. And also there are lots of civic tech organizations across, you know, so many places, conflict countries and other places that we've seen. And so, yeah, opportunities for collaboration there perhaps as well.
Awesome. Hiba, you have been a long time with speaking. I'm sure that you have a couple of ideas to give us.
I found my fellow panelists absolutely brilliant. So I've been very busy taking notes of what they were sharing. But perhaps I could just leave with a couple of messages. I think to the talents out there, to the young talents, I would say we need positive disruption. We need ideas. We need to think differently and think about solutions that we can bring in to disrupt a system that is not necessarily fit for purpose. So we need you to also fight cynicism that peace is possible, which is really creeping. And as a Palestinian who grew up in a conflict country, one feels often at loss of hope, but then we need to fight cynicism. And I think the younger generation, the talents out there can actually, by providing some technological solutions and thinking creatively, we can restore hope that peace is possible. And I think as talented professionals, I hope that you would, as my colleague said, put more of your energy into solving social problems through your technological and scientific hats on. So help us make peace possible, please. Thank you.
It has been beautiful, Hiba. Miguel, you have to you have to be
what can I say? It's such a great message, absolutely. But look, there's a question in the title of this panel, which is can technology end wars? And my answer is no. Technology will not end wars. Humans will, hopefully, using technology. But what we can do with your technology, with your help as technologists, is we can hopefully address underlying causes of conflict, which we know is the thing that we have to do, and build constructive dialogue. And my second message is we need you, technologists, we need software developers, we need all sorts of engineers. And there's hunger for this in our field. There isn't a lot of money, maybe not as much as in Silicon Valley, but consider it when you go into the field and you go into looking for a job. There is great hunger for people like you. So don't forget about us.
Thank you very much. I really want to thank all the panelists. I think it has been brilliant. I think it has been inspirational, and I'm sure that as I know, there are many labs at the EPFL started to get interest in using technology for humans, as Miguel has said. So I'm sure that your message that has been loud and clear and really absolutely brilliant is going to be useful for all of them. So yeah, I close this amazing session by saying, yeah, let's do it again. Let's put in the same virtual room, in the future, maybe, fortunately, physical room, people coming from different perspectives to work together and make it possible. As Hiba has said, there is hope, and there is for sure a lot of energy and a lot of will to use tech and not only tech for the promotion of peace, finish this cynicism and go for it. I'm sure that we are going to get many talents interested in this field. Thank you very much again, and I wish you a very, very well and good and sunny afternoon today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mariazel.
Thanks. Bye.